Now, I know the title of the video is Remembering Sonic Forces, but I never forgot. And in some ways, I wish I had. Ever since its conception, I've always had super mixed feelings about this game. The road to its release was a bunch of nothing for me. Sonic Forces was announced at the same time as Sonic Mania. My attention and sheer excitement was solely focused on the obvious choice. I'm sure my hype for Mania was part bias, but objectively, the game shows so much promise with every trailer and gameplay showcase they revealed. Forces was the entire opposite for me. Nothing about it seemed original or interesting aside from being able to create your own OC. So Sonic Forces released, the community was super vocal about it, mostly in a negative way, and soon enough it's like everyone forgot its existence. I was part of the crowd that forgot, and the only reason I ever had to play it was because 2 years later the game was free on PlayStation Plus during a time where I happened to have PlayStation Plus. I downloaded it, I posted on social media playing Sonic Forces, and 4 hours later I said, beat Sonic Forces. So if that is the case, then why make a video about it? That's because a friend of mine gave me a huge Sonic hyperfixation, as the cool kids say. One I haven't felt in a very long time, so yeah, I'm in a huge Sonic mood. And with Frontiers on its way, I would like to give one more look to the game that precedes it, give my own opinion about it, how I believe it could have been better, and some interesting development information. Now, I know some Sonic fans can be quite explosive, so I'll try to tackle this as delicate as possible. Sonic Forces is a fucking disaster. I'm kidding, I just said that to catch your attention. But god, does this game reeks of wasted potential. And that is a shame. There's things here that I like, but they never hit that mark. Modern Sonic, for example. I was totally fine with the idea of the boost formula making a return. I love Unleashed, I love Colors, and I love Generations. So I thought they couldn't fuck it up in Forces. And somehow they did! In this game, it's at its worst. It's like they had a winning recipe but decided not to follow through. For starters, Sonic doesn't feel good to control in this entry. His speed is awkward as shit. I know he's the fastest thing alive, but here, his acceleration is so unnatural. A problem more accentuated during the 2D sections where you occasionally need to make more precise movements. And to make matters worse, his weight is horrendous. He has his double jump from Colors, but it's like they neutered it here. It barely gives you any extra height and is beyond useless to reposition yourself. I lost account of how many times I missed the simplest of jumps simply because it's next to impossible to get a good feeling of Sonic. But luckily, or unfortunately, depending on who you are, he's not the worst in the game. That honor goes to Classic Sonic. If I ever make a list of the most unnecessary inclusions in any game, Classic Sonic from Forces will easily take one of the top spots. Just when I thought Modern Sonic was awkward, Classic Sonic somehow manages to make it worse. His weight is obnoxiously heavy, a problem made even worse by the lack of any momentum-based platforming. It's not like I was expecting the same physics from the Genesis titles, but something like Generations would have been fine. But alas, that is not the case. Classic Sonic is riddled with problems, and every time I get to play as him, I'm in a constant state of suffering. There's never a single jump that doesn't make me feel nervous. I always feel I'm struggling against the game because Classic Sonic is so uncomfortable to play as. It sucks when I'm going down a slope only for him to pull a full stop because momentum is not a thing in Sonic Forces. Only positive thing he has is the drop dash technique from Sonic Mania because, yeah, that's an incredible addition. It lets me finish his levels faster, which is a really good thing, because classic Sonic stages are incredibly slow, painful and boring. To give you a better example, playing as classic Sonic in Forces is like going from Captain Falcon to Ganondorf in Smash Bros. But even then, I actually have fun playing as Ganondorf.
Suavemente bésame que quiero sentir tus labios besándome otra vez.
And finally there was the Avatar, and I want to get this out of the way. I love the concept.
I'm sure any Sonic fan at any point of their lives created their own OC, even if it was just to mess around with all those Flash games that were so popular back in the 2000s. So seeing that come to life in an actual Sonic game made me beyond happy, and it brought me back to simpler times. Every time I got more equipment by completing levels and missions, I will go back to my avatar just because it was so fun to try more clothes, and I like the idea that different species give you different perks. Customization was easily my favorite part about Sonic Forces. I could beat Infinite while wearing a clown costume and Sans hoodie, and that's pretty funny, because if we talk about the avatar gameplay itself... okay, in all fairness, it's not bad, but it leaves a lot to be desired. Avatar was like modern Sonic without the boost, but still had the same issues I had with the weight and speed. Alright, yeah. What sets them apart is their access to wisp guns, guns that have the power of wisps and give you access to a basic attack as well as a special action, depending on the weapon you're carrying. This can range from a flamethrower that also lets you infinitely explode in the air for some limited time, to an electrical whip that has a lightspeed dash, and many more. I like the idea, but I felt it was tremendously undercooked, and some weapons are clearly better than others. I spent most of my time using the same ones because the others felt slow or useless in comparison, and you don't get much incentive to try more stuff. I put part of that blame on the level design. No matter which character you play as, modern, classic, or the avatar, Sonic Forces has some of the blandest, soulless, and least interesting level design in the whole series. I can't tell you how many of them end just as soon as they start to do something interesting. They try to make them more exhilarating by putting 1,000 rings in your way, but since they removed the life system, they mean nothing aside from being an extra hit. And that also includes the red rings, which only serve to unlock more stages that also last less than a minute. But I think the worst part is that most of them can be beaten with barely any input from the player. And I'm serious, check this out, it's embarrassing!
Team up. It doesn't matter what obstacles they put in our way. We'll blow past
It's this
everything
level,
they
it's
throw
this
at
level.
us.
Oh, Ricky, don't mention that I'm actually watching the joke video. I'm gonna let the joke video, so you will have my questions. It's so sad when Forces has 30 stages, including bosses, but it's only 4 hours long because there's nothing going on these levels. There's no incentive for exploring them, and I never felt motivated to try them again outside of some easy trophies I could get for my PlayStation profile. You know, when I started the game, I selected this so-called hard mode. But I genuinely did not feel any difference from my first playthrough. This goes back to the argument I made on that one video, where more difficulty modes don't always make a difference, because a game is usually designed in a certain way. But in this case, it's like Forces was designed to be a brain-dead adventure from the beginning.
I think what frustrates me the most about it is that it takes all gameplay styles, but all of them are huge steps back. Either because the level design is worse, or because the controls are not very good. And that sucks, because I'm confident that with more time and effort, we could have had some incredible stuff.
Classic Sonic. Well, I will just say remove him because he doesn't matter at all in the game. But if you need to have him here, implement momentum-based platforming, a level design that accommodates to that, and maybe throw the elemental shields as a bonus. His main issue is how clunky and heavy he feels, and his levels are so fucking boring because you can easily beat them by just moving right and occasionally jumping. Also, I know this only happens for one level, but who thought another scroll section was a good idea? That's the most anti-Sonic design I've ever seen! Take that shit out! Modern Sonic. Fix his acceleration and his double jump. But I think his main problem is that his levels play themselves. What they needed to do was reduce the automated sequences and offer the player multiple pathways to finish a level. They got it right in Generation, so what was the problem here? I actually know the answer, but I'll tell you that later. And finally, the Avatar. My main problem here is that their Wisp mechanic could be much more, because through all the levels, you get these capsules that contain a wisp that lets you use their special technique, implying you have the corresponding weapon. This felt so restrictive to me, because in all fairness, using a Wispon's unique ability to clear a level can get pretty fun. but since some Wispons are superior to others, I did not feel inclined to use some of them like Cube or Asteroid. They're fine, I want to make that clear again, but I can think of a few ways to make them more interesting. Imagine if you could swap between 4 Wispons with the D-pad so you can effectively benefit your current situation. You can use the flamethrower to quickly dispatch off enemies, and if you think fast, you can swap to the lighting one and use its ability to zip through a line of rings. And if you find a blocked path, you can use Cube to open it. And say, if rings were used as a currency to buy accessories, that will motivate me to swap to Void so I can grab as many as possible. Or if that sounds broken to you, imagine if your Wispon changed depending on which capsule you grabbed, giving you immediate access to its skills. It would be so cool if the levels were divided in multiple paths, and each of them has its own challenge built around that Wisp, which can force you into getting better with that weapon. Ooh, I just love thinking about that. Fun fact, Whisper the Wolf has exactly that in the IDW comics, so it's not a far-fetched idea. Of course, this will mean a lot of levels will need to be revamped, but I see that as a good thing, honestly.
I cannot exactly call Sonic Forces incomplete, but it's like when you're in school, college, and you think, I don't care about getting a high grade on this class, I just want to fucking pass. That was my whole mentality throughout my career. And I feel that was the whole creative process behind Sonic Forces. It has great ideas, but none of them ever seem to realize their full potential.
The story is a good example. For starters, I'm not against the idea of Sonic having serious plots. But Forces is a weird case, as if they tried to have a bigger and more mature story, but the writers fell asleep halfway through. So many concepts and plot devices are introduced, but they are never developed properly and don't deliver a good conclusion. You have the villains and Shadow making a return, but it's quickly revealed they're all fakes created by the Phantom Ruby, and half of them are taken off screen. You have Infinite, who is incredibly hard to take seriously, because his backstory makes him look like a whiny crybaby, and they really take it seriously. There's an old space concept that gets quickly dropped in 30 seconds, or the case of classic Sonic having no relevance in the story other than being an unnecessary tie-in to Sonic Mania. Even the writing is weak. You have the implication of Tails having lost it, and Sonic being tortured by Eggman for 6 months, but when you see them again, they're both totally fine. Sonic even frees himself from his imprisonment. The only real loss here was Tails' character having another regression.
Sonic, help me!
At least I can say I enjoyed Sonic's arc and this specific quote.
None of this is good, Vector. That's why it's called war.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not enough to make this story any more than completely underwhelming. Other things that left me mixed are the soundtrack and the visuals. There are some great tunes in and there. I like the one that sounds like Barbie Girl.
We made it so far.
The main theme, Fist Bomb, is also a great banger. But even after my second playthrough, I still find it hard to remember some of these tracks. I put some blame on the levels barely lasting enough for these songs to make an impression. So yeah, it's pretty sad. And I want to ask you, what do you think is worse? Being forgettable or being plain fucking bad? Classic Sonic. It's so horrible! It's like they told the composer to replicate Genesis style music, but he wasn't giving a shit at any moment. My friend Isaiah, who greatly helped me on this video, made a very good point. The compositions are honestly not half bad, but the instrumentation is what kills it. It's a really good observation, but unfortunately, this is the final result we got. Classic Sonic's music is obnoxiously bad. Now, the visuals. I think Forces looks pretty nice. The graphics are great and the character models are very expressive. But aesthetically, I'm on and off about it. I like the looks from levels like Sunset Heights, Metropolis, and the 30 seconds you spend on an old space. But others like Green Hill, Chemical Plants, and the factories feel very dull. Because even if you explore a bunch of different locations, a good chunk of them feel samey. It also doesn't help when the enemy design is incredibly uninspiring and generic. And I think that about sums up my feelings towards Sonic Forces. I was barely excited for its release, the negative backlash it got was unsurprising, and once I finally got to play it, I just found it laughable how they built this up to be more than what it was, how it constantly attempts to be something more but it never delivers. I don't think it's an unredeemable piece of shit game, but it's ridiculously average, and I imagine it disappointed a lot of people.
Normally I will just end the video here by asking, how did the game turn out this way without giving you a proper answer? But lucky for you, my friend Isaiah got involved with this video and sent me some interesting tidbits about the development of the game. So let's give those a quick look, shall we?
Sonic Forces was said to be in development for 4 years, but this statement isn't entirely true. In 2013, work began on the Hedgehog Engine 2, which was intended for the next title. Starting in 2014, Shun Nakamura and a small team will develop artwork and concepts for the next game, which took them around 2 years, only for Forces to begin development between 2016 to 2017. While the avatar was one of the most defining features from the game, it wasn't very easy to implement. Sonic Team and Takashi Iizuka were all down for the idea since they knew Sonic fans, especially Americans, were really into creating their own characters. They wanted the avatar to have a bigger focus, but Sega of Europe and Sega of America were against this idea. So in order to keep both sides happy, a lot of restrictions were placed on the avatar. One of them being, and I'm not kidding, the avatar is not allowed to look cooler than Sonic. Why is Sega so obsessed with showing Sonic as a garage too? It's like when they limited Ian Flynn from showing Sonic with strong emotions in the comics. By the way, I just want to point out that on this scene, Sonic's children were wiped out of existence and Sega was like, what a pussy, he shouldn't cry over something like that. Earlier I stated that I knew why the levels were so short and underwhelming. So what happened? Sonic Forces was marketed as having the same creative team from Colors and Generations, and while part of that is true, the full picture is that the group was much smaller than previously. The level designers in particular were only 3 people. What makes this more interesting is that none of them work on any previous Sonic game, aside from the lead designer who had some experience with Lost World. Now, add that to the year of development they had, and it makes sense why the levels are so restrictive and linear. And it's not just the gameplay that received a blow here. A few months after the game release, an early script of the story from January 2016 was leaked, which showed the story at first had darker themes and different plot devices, such as the Phantom Ruby being called Voltron, with classic Sonic being a copy created by it. So it was later changed so it will be tied with Mania. Even more interesting is that Mephiles from 06 was supposed to appear towards the end of the game and he will also be a copy. There's even a news dialogue from episode Shadow which hinted at a darker tone and a bunch of cut content that sounded more interesting than what we got in the end, like the Null Space level being longer than what it was. Now, do you all remember Aaron Weber? He used to be the social media manager for Sonic until he became the director of strategy, studio and community relations at Sega of Japan. He left a number of very harsh criticisms for the story and dialogue, like character inconsistencies, story plot holes, and lines that were deemed childish. Some of these were addressed, but Sega being Sega decided to ignore a good chunk of them. And the final straw that proves how boring and incomplete the story is, in case you didn't notice that already, are the official comics. Sega hired Ian Flynn and Adam Bryce Thomas, who previously worked on the Sonic Archie comics and now do the IDW series, to create a 4-issue run which fills a lot of plot holes and goes more in depth on things like Infinite's backstory or why Silver is present in the story. If the plot of Forces unsurprisingly bored you, this is easily the best you can get out of it.
I think it's sad that the best thing I got from this game was an incredibly successful stream because people love seeing how fast I could lose my mind playing it. Again, I don't think Sonic Forces is a huge piece of shit game, but it's pretty underwhelming that it never reached its full potential. But what is done, is done. I don't know if Sega learned from this experience, but at least I hope the upcoming Sonic Frontiers will be something great. I mean, Ian Flynn is writing the story and that alone is enough to make me excited for it. And you know, I'd rather be optimistic to a certain degree than being a pessimistic asshole. But only time will tell. So anyway, thank you so much for joining, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to support the channel, well, there's many ways you can do that. Thank you once again, I'll see you next time, and take care!